Welcome to Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Evan Crean. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living. My pronouns are he, him.
My name is Megan Kearns. My pronouns are she, her. I write film reviews for Edge Media Network. I, too, am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, and I'm a member of Gallica, the Society of LGBTQ Entertainment Critics.
And my name is Dave Riedel. My pronouns are he, him. I write for the Chicago Reader, and I am also a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
Yeah, you are.
Damn right. Goddamn right is what I meant. I hate it when people just say damn in like PG and PG-13 movies. It's like nobody talks that way. Goddamn. Okay.
That reminds me, I just rewatched Raiders of the Lost Ark, and actually my roommate was watching it, and I'm quoting it in the other room as I'm hearing it. And right before Marion Ravenwood says, I say, that's right, I'm your goddamn partner.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's a great line.
Yeah.
It is.
Funny,
Great use of goddamn.
Funny, I also went to Indiana Jones when he said goddamn, but I just went to Sean Connery slapping him in the face going, blasphemy. It's a great moment.
I just thought of a use of damn on its own that works.
What's that?
It's when the doc is waiting for Marty at the end of Back to the Future. He's like, damn, where's that kid? Damn.
He pulls out the 3 watches.
Yeah.
It's a great moment.
I love Christopher Lloyd.
Yeah, me too.
Yep.
Well, we are here to talk about some movies today, in case you didn't know. But before we talk about those movies, save your booze for the Patreon, Dave.
I haven't thrown a boo in a while. So
it's true, you haven't.
Yeah.
Before we get to this week's movies, I'll mention that over on our Patreon this week, we are talking about the 1993 film Jurassic Park in honor of its recent 30th anniversary. And we had a very fun conversation about that movie. And
you two did. I mean,
yeah, one of us, I'm not going to name names here, may or may not be a fan of that movie and watched it under duress.
It was fine.
And we may have had to make a trade with a certain person to get them to watch. No,
you're the ones who are willingly giving that up. I haven't asked for a trade.
I'm joking.
Yep. So that was a very fun conversation over on our Patreon. So if you're a patron, check that out. And if you're not, consider joining. So for $5 a month, you get access to exclusive audio. We do bonus episodes each week where we talk about generally older films. We have polls you can vote in. And those are a lot of fun. And while I'm at it, let's say a shout out to our sponsor piece patron, Heather Sachs. Thank you for your support, Heather.
Thanks, Heather.
And yeah, so thank you, Heather. And we have 2 movies we're talking about this week. The first movie is the documentary Stan Lee, which, guess what? It's about Stan Lee.
Sure is.
Yep. And the other movie we're talking about this week is a Netflix rom-com, The Perfect Find, which has Gabrielle Union and some other folks in it. And we're going to talk about that second. So first up, we want to talk about Stan Lee, which is a documentary. It's directed by David Gelb. And here's our short IMDb summary, which I'm already annoyed with. 100 years of dreaming, 100 years of creating, 100 years of Stan Lee. Ugh.
I mean, he made it to 95. Let's not,
Yeah.
Come on.
So, yeah, it's a documentary that traces the life of Stan Lee and his work and his, larger-than-life persona that he crafted as the head honcho over at Marvel as a writer, editor, and kind of face and all-around, I guess, mascot of Marvel. As he basically
Mascot's a good word.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think what else to say about this documentary. So it traces his life. There's a lot of voiceover from interviews with Stan Lee himself, some kind of sparse voiceover in interviews with other people like his secretary and other collaborators like Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby and what else? There's like these little dioramas that they have in the film to kind of show off moments from Stan Lee's life and probably just to fill in moments where they don't have footage or they can't rely on stock footage as easily as they can once we start getting to like the 50s, 60s,
Yeah.
70s.
I'm going to break in here for a minute and ask
Sure.
the two of you, did either of you think that the diorama choice or the figurine choices or whatever that was, did you think that was a little strange when you've
Yes.
got a guy
Yes.
who spent his life in comics?
Yes. It's like, why
Yes.
aren't we seeing comic style
Yeah.
artwork? Why are we getting diorama, figurines?
And-
Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah, maybe Mr. Gelb was like, let's just, everybody expects comic panels, so why don't I do figurines or whatever? And I'm just going to say bad choice. So,
Yeah.
not terrible, but not great.
Yeah, it's not great. And I think for me personally, there are a few things that were strange or bad choices, but I'll open the floor to you two to talk about it first. Dave, what did you think of this?
I just thought it was really boring because most of this stuff I know because he's so fucking everywhere. And this is really unpopular. I've never really liked Stan Lee, the persona. I just don't. He is always, and he says this in the documentary, and he's joking, but he's only half joking. He's like, Joan and I, his wife Joan, were so vain that we named our daughter Joan. I was like, you are vain. You are so fucking vain because I just, and it's torture to go to when he was still living, to go to a fucking screening and then have all the fucking doofuses, who are the big Marvel fans, like freak the fuck out when he shows up on screen like they've never seen him before, which is not really Stan Lee's problem, but he brought it on himself. Anyway, the stuff that was more interesting was his early childhood, because I just always kind of like hearing stories about what New York City was like in the 20s and 30s and whatever. I mean, he wasn't that old. Well, he was that old. But that I thought was cool. But then when it just gets into his later years and it's just a lot of stuff I know just because he's been around so long, and also his choice of hairstyles is interesting over the years.
That was startling to me in the beginning when we see Stan Lee. What was it during the 60s?
Yeah, he's bald.
He's bald,
more or less.
and
Yes, he is.
I'd only known him as having hair, and now kind of like re-engineering that in my head. I'm like, aha, okay, yeah, that big mop was a toupee this entire time. That makes a lot more sense, but it was extremely jarring to hear his voice come from like a clean-shaven bald man.
Yeah, it was actually more the fact that he didn't have any facial hair that was strange when you saw him like that, because I don't think
Yeah.
I've ever seen him without at least a mustache,
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, but I was actually kind of surprised, I wouldn't say pleasantly, but surprised that they got into the whole Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko credit thing a little bit. They didn't get into it much.
Yeah, it felt underbaked and
Oh, for sure.
underrepresented for
And
what
then,
I heard it was a very big deal. A big
Yeah.
falling
Right.
out between all of them.
Right.
yeah, and then apparently between I don't know, sometime in the mid 90s until Iron Man, he didn't do anything like go to DC. So,
Yeah, that
No, we're
That,
just not
I
going to talk
think-
about that.
yeah, that's another strange choice that the documentary made, is that it just kind of left this giant hole in his life and then jumped ahead, and it was in a rush for the last 15 20
It
minutes
really
of the documentary.
was.
It glossed over things. It just jumped to way like 20 years had gone by. We didn't even know anything that was going on in between. Like, how did leaving Marvel affect him, and like what was his life like, and how did someone who is so obsessed with work deal with not doing that work? And there were so many. This movie or this documentary focused a lot on this idea that work was a big deal to him, and working because his father struggled to find work, and it was important to him to have steady employment. And then there was this great opportunity to talk more about that, and they just didn't even bother going over it.
Yeah. It was a little weird.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a Disney documentary, right? So they're not really going to shit on one of their big stars, right?
I did think that, yeah. It seemed like maybe they just sanded down all the edges on this because we knew it was gonna like end up on Disney Plus.
Yeah. Megan, what about you? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, it's funny that you guys are talking about that specifically because very early into the documentary, I'm like, well, this documentary is bullshit. Like already it's biased because I mean, which I know is kind of an absurd thing to say because everything has bias. Every documentary is biased. There is no such thing as a completely factual documentary. It always has a perspective that it's trying to shape and tell. But, you know, I think it's an interesting choice to use completely archival footage from Stan Lee, where he does almost exclusively the voiceovers. And, you know, it kind of, in a weird way, reminded me of the Brian De Palma documentary. But that's, of course, very different because you're having Brian De Palma there, whereas this, you're not having Stan Lee because he's already passed away. So you're kind of splicing together all of this former footage. But really early on, when he's talking about creating certain characters, I'm like, but you didn't just create that. You created that with Jack Kirby, or I'm like, or you created that with Steve Ditko. Like, it wasn't just you, especially with the Jack Kirby stuff. And like, they didn't even mention the fact that even before, like, so very early on in their working relationship, Jack Kirby was going to leave with another artist. And he always thought that Stan Lee, like, kind of like blew the whistle on the fact that he was going to leave. And so he didn't get like the pay he was supposed to get. There was some kind of controversy. And so he was always salty about that. And then when he came back later after freelancing to work again with the company that became Marvel, then again, there was like, they clashed and he, you know, obviously left because he didn't feel like he was getting enough credit, enough pay. And so I think I thought it was a weird choice to not talk about that, like you guys are saying. But then I will say it is kind of interesting that at the end of the documentary, it kind of addresses that. And you have Stan Lee talking about Steve Ditko being like, no, you didn't create Spider-Man. We created Spider-Man because he wasn't a character. Like, he was your idea, but it's just an idea until I draw him. And then to hear Stan Lee being like, no, the person who has the idea is the one who creates them. And, you know, I can write the character and give it to any artist and have them draw it. And I'm like, oh my God, the ego is out of control. Yeah. And which I think is really fascinating. And then and I think what's so fascinating about that statement in particular is the reason Jack Kirby didn't co-create Spider-Man is because he didn't like the way he was drawing him. So he went to Steve Ditko. So clearly not any artist can just go and create your idea.
It's true.
So I'm like, you're contradicting yourself right here. But the documentary is not like, yes, it's including that to the documentary's credit, it at least has that. But you're not having any kind of commentary or anything, or it's just, I don't know. So it's an interesting choice, a strange choice. But to what you said, Dave, I think you're right. They don't, because I looked at this director's filmography and mostly it was food documentaries and then also doing the behind the scenes on the Marvel series. And I'm like, so yeah, probably doesn't want to, you know, shit all over, you know, someone who is beloved and who is such a cornerstone of Marvel and Disney, you know, franchises. So, but some odd choices were made.
Well,
and I'm sorry. I was going to say, did you see what Jack Kirby's son wrote?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that was a scathing indictment.
Not pleased,
no,
Mr. Jack Kirby.
No.
Yeah. So I bought that book. It's a biography of Stan Lee that came out, I don't remember it, I want to say about a year ago. It's called True Believer, The Rise and Fall of Stan Lee. And I guess from what I have read so far, it is a more rounded you know, it's not critical of him. So I'll be interested to read that. But at the same time, I kind of feel like, God, I got to read about this fucking guy again. What did I do to myself? So
I mean, he is so, and I mean, part of it is that he did make himself the mascot of Marvel, but he is so influential. I mean, so is Jack Kirby, obviously. I mean, especially in comic circles. Like, but I think about that too, is like, Stan Lee is so influential, but so is Jack Kirby, you know, and the fact that And I will say again, to this documentary's credit, it talks about how Jack Kirby's like style was so incredible that like whenever they would get new artists, they would trace Jack Kirby's art to mimic the style. And I'm like, that shows like how influential his art was, and Steve Ditko too, of course. But it's interesting because I do think about like, you know, people who are watching Marvel movies. There's such a focus on Stan Lee and not as much on Jack Kirby or Steve Ditko. Do people know who the two of them are, or do they just know who Stan Lee is? Probably just Stan Lee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I was just thinking about growing up, I was not a huge comic book reader. I had the, you know, odd couple of comics here and there, but I remember reading Marvel comics, and I remember the Stan's soapbox section and seeing Stan Lee's signature and feeling his presence even before I knew what he looked like. You know, he was there, and he was a presence that was known, and he just kind of had his stamp and influence over everything. And I always thought that was cool that he had his little like area where he would write about stuff or respond to readers or talk about social issues. I thought that was always a cool thing that he did, but he was always kind of like this, for me, this figure that I was like, oh, okay, this is someone that I know, even if I don't know who he is just yet. And then getting to know him, I always thought, you know, he's a very charismatic and fun guy, and he always had a good sense of humor about himself. And then seeing this documentary, I just felt like it was an overly kind portrait of someone that I could tell had some, you know, flaws like any other person walking around out there.
Totally.
And any other, you know, person that achieves massive success, you know, most people like that step on other people to get to where they are, or they are hard to work with, or they do bad things to other people. And so it was disappointing to feel like it was such a sanitized version of his life. And I just was so frustrated by the fact that it just seemed to skip large parts of his life after the 90s even. And pacing wise, I felt like this was just slow for an hour and 26 minutes. And narratively, I didn't love how it was so chronological. I really, really enjoyed the parts where they were talking to him, or he was talking in interviews about his philosophies of storytelling and Marvel's philosophies around storytelling and representation being very important, and tackling, you know, very important themes. Like it's funny because when they got to the part where they were talking about the X-Men, it was so obvious to me that that was the next thing that they were going to talk about. And I said aloud, all right, so now we're going to hear about the X-Men. And that's the next part. But all that stuff was the most interesting to me, is those storytelling philosophies and those goals, and trying not to talk down to kids who are reading the comics, and challenging them with themes and words, and just respecting them as an audience. And that to me was the most interesting part, but I was bored during large parts because of this just slow pacing, uninteresting style of storytelling. And for me, one of the most bizarre oversights in the film is that they don't mention at all that Stan Lee is Jewish.
I knew you. Yes. Yeah. I knew
at all. Not even so in passing, weird. Which, not for
Super
nothing,
weird.
if you even zoom in at the X-Men and Magneto, and you have this like a character that's their trauma is so deeply rooted in the Holocaust, and that theme of the Holocaust is ever present in the X-Men because everyone is trying to kill the mutants and get rid of them. And it's so weird to me that they didn't bring it up at all.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think they know their audience. Wink.
Ew.
No, it's just an indictment of.
No, I know, but you're right. I hadn't even thought of it that way. That's so gross, but you're right. Not gross on you, gross on that attitude.
Yeah, I mean, that's really cynical of me, but at the same time, I kind of feel like it might be true a little bit, though.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the thing. Like, so was Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby was Jewish too. And so were so many comics artists, like a lot of them. So it is a bizarre thing to not discuss their Jewish identity, especially considering they talk so much about, like, Stan Lee specifically talks about how he wanted to infuse anti-war, anti-fascism and politics into comics, and having a black superhero, with T'Challa and the mutants and equality, and it's like, but we're not going to talk about anti-Semitism. We're not going to talk about being Jewish, like in the Holocaust. Like it's mind-boggling.
Yeah. It was weird, too, because they talk about Captain America and exploring those storylines,
Right.
even kind of sensing that Hitler and Nazism was going to be an issue before other people were kind of figuring that out.
Yep, totally.
Right.
It's so fucking weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very, very strange. And also, I was, speaking of like 90s era Stan Lee, I was disappointed they didn't at all mention his cameo in Mallrats, because for me, that was just kind of a seminal moment of kind of knowing who Stan Lee is, like I said, after reading comics and kind of having a sense of who he is. And then I feel like that was kind of a launch pad to later him being in all of these cameos and showing up as Stan Lee, but, as characters in these Marvel movies.
Right.
Who would have known that Kevin Smith was ahead of his time?
I know.
I mean, he's such a comics nerd. It makes sense that he'd have
For sure.
Stan Lee as a cameo. I'd completely forgotten about that. Yeah.
Yeah. An extended cameo. He tells that whole story to Jason Lee.
Oh my
Mhm.
God. Yes. So
Yeah. And how he's
Right.
had to say, I don't know if I can say this because, I've been with my wife Joan since like whenever. I mean, they were what? They were barely in their 20s when they met. And he's like, Stan, it's just a movie. I mean, come on. Just do the lines. Like, all right. Anyway.
This was a bummer. 'Cause
Yeah, it's underwhelming for sure.
It's underwhelming, yeah. I wouldn't say high hopes, but I thought we were going to get a much more interesting
Hopes?
story.
Regular old hopes.
Yeah. Medium hopes.
Yeah. I keep coming back to I'm just some weird choices.
Yeah. For sure.
Perplexing.
Totally. Yeah. Oh, one thing I will add, the whole anti-drug story arc I thought was really interesting, and
Yes.
I was glad to hear that in the documentary about how the government asked him to write this anti-drug storyline, and the comics authority was like, no, you can't even mention drugs, and they did it anyway. I thought that was just, I don't know. I mean, I just thought that was a really cool story. I'm glad that landed in the doc because I hadn't heard it before.
Yeah, it was funny
Yeah.
how much the Comics Authority Code was so similar to the Hays Code.
Right. Indeed.
Yeah. But it's interesting
Well-
that the doc doesn't talk about, or if it did, I missed it, but it doesn't talk about how Stan Lee worked to make the code be more lenient and to like rework it.
That would have been interesting.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
they left out a
because
lot
that's
of
what I
things,
read.
right?
They
So-
did, yeah, but I read that and I was like, that's like, why wouldn't you include? That's bizarre. Anyway, again, another bizarre choice. But at the same time, too, I
Weird
mean, I guess
choices
you
all around.
very much so. But I mean, I guess you can't include everything. But I don't know. Maybe this is just intended as like a teaser to educate yourself more on him. I don't know. Maybe it's just considered a love letter to him. I don't know.
Shrug.
That's right. Shrug emoji.
It's a bummer.
Yeah.
Should
'cause
we
he's-
move on to the perfect find?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think I know, Dave, you're not totally into Stan Lee, but I think he's regardless of what you think of him, I think he is a very interesting person. And it's unfortunate
Yeah,
the documentary
for
didn't
sure.
match that. But anyway.
And I will say, he is incredibly charismatic. I mean, that's.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, I can't deny that. I mean, the guy, you just kind of want to listen to him. He's a
Yeah.
really. I mean, maybe this goes to the whole who created what argument, but like, he is a really great storyteller, at least of his own story.
Right.
know?
Yeah. True.
Yeah. So that is a choice I do get behind, the fact that they use so much of his audio.
Right. Yeah, if you have it, why not use it?
Right. Totally.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, The Perfect Find. This is as I mentioned at the top of the show, it's a rom-com on Netflix. It is directed by Numa Perrier. It is written by Tia Williams and Lee Davenport, and it's based on a book by Tia Williams, I believe.
That is correct.
And let's do our IMDb summary here. After a high-profile firing, Jenna's fashion career comeback hits a snag when she falls for a charming, much younger coworker who happens to be her boss's son.
Oh.
Sparks. Yeah.
Sorry.
I wish was in the summary. That would have been amazing. Just period. Oh man. As sparks fly, Jenna must decide if she'll risk it all on a secret romance.
Well, let's put the mystery to rest. Well, yes, she does.
She does. Yes.
Spoilered.
Yes. Yep. Gabrielle Union plays Jenna. She falls for her boss Gina Torres' son, Keith Powers. And yeah, it's about, an older woman, younger man. Can they be together with their age difference? Can they be together because they're both co-workers, and because Gabrielle Union up until this point has been Gina Torres' enemy, rival, I guess, before this tenuous working relationship. Yeah. So what do we think of this movie?
I liked it.
Let the rom-com leader go first.
Oh, I thought, well, that would be you, but
No.
But I already said I liked it.
I don't think I can match your.
Yeah.
Oh,
You did?
Thank you. That's kind. But I already said I liked it. I liked this a lot.
Yeah, overall, I did too.
Oh, yay. Yeah, I liked this a lot. So I really like Numa Perrier as a filmmaker. I saw her first film, Jezebel, about a cam girl who is doing sex work. And it's really fascinating film and very restrained and understated, which is very different than this. So I was very curious to see what she would do with a rom-com. And she posted on Twitter that this is her love letter to rom-coms. And I think that that's very clear. Especially, I noticed it immediately with the music choices, considering that they're it's very evocative of rom-coms like When Harry Met Sally and Sleepless in Seattle, using classic singers like Billie Holiday and Nat King Cole and Aretha Franklin and Ella Fitzgerald. And I love that almost all, if not all, of the singers are Black musicians in the film, because there's also 80s artists like the Jets and Mariah Carey and Solange Knowles. And then there's also talk of the classic Hollywood star Nina Mae McKinney, who is the Black Garbo. And I love all those touches. And I think that Numa Perrier has a really good eye for filmmaking. And I think all of the colors are very vibrant. I loved the sets. And especially in a time when so many films kind of look dimly lit and gritty. Although I like gritty films, but sometimes there's a certain aesthetic that you can't really see vibrant colors. And I love that this is a very vibrant film. And I like Gabrielle Union tremendously. And I think that she's really good in this. I adore Gina Torres. I think Gina Torres should be in everything because I love her.
She's great.
So great.
Yeah.
And I love, I love the romance between, I can't think of Gabrielle Union's character's name, but her and Eric.
Jenna.
Thank you, Jenna Jones. It's funny, I remember her last name, but I love their romance. Like right from the start, they have this draw to each other, and they have this connection and this chemistry that's very palpable. And yeah, I just really like their flirtations. I love that they both bond over film, and they both love, classic film, and it's lovely to see. And yeah, the only thing that I personally felt was unnecessary was at the very end of the film when Jenna gets pregnant, because Eric has said he doesn't want children. And for me, I didn't feel like that was a necessary plot point. But it's a nitpick. It's fine. But yeah, I do think it's interesting, their conversations about age and how she talks about him being so young when he's like, he doesn't care. He just thinks she's hot and he just wants to be with her and he's just smitten with her. And she's the one who's like hung up on the age differences, which is interesting. So,
yeah. I always like rom-coms where the characters like really like each other and they don't spend a lot of time bickering. I mean, I love those too. But it is nice to see movies where this guy is just unabashedly all in on her from the moment he meets her.
Yes.
You know, he's just like, I don't remember what he says. He's a mumbler too, so I had to watch this with the, subtitles on. I kind of felt like texting you, Evan, like, hey, guess what I'm doing? But, but I think Gabrielle Union's great in this. Nina Torres, the scenes that I also really appreciated that they didn't spend a lot of time in the movie pussyfooting around the fact that the two of them were together. Like she knew, his mother knew almost from the beginning.
Yeah.
And she's got that great scene where she's like kind of talking around it. And then she finally says, let's just cut the shit. You know?
Yeah.
Can't pull anything over on Gina Torres.
Yeah.
It's true.
And I also like how she comes to Gabrielle Union's apartment at the end and does insult her in her own home, which is a little weird. But
yeah, indeed.
but then just, you know, tells this story about how her parents hated her husband, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not going to do that to my son. And you can see at the end that, you know, she has made the choice to be happy about it, you know? So that's also kind of a nice surprise. The whole pregnancy thing did I kind of wondered where they were going with it. And when I say it, I mean their relationship ends and then they don't see each other for a long time. And then Gabrielle Union, you know, calls him up to talk and he goes to meet her. And I was like, is she going to be pregnant? Because they've been apart like a while, you know? So like this baby's going to be pretty far along. And, that kind of underwhelms me a little bit. But overall, I really liked this. I also appreciated the fact that when it's a trope, but when Gabrielle Union gets all jealous that one of his ex-girlfriends shows up at a birthday party and she goes over and just like inserts herself into their conversation. After the ex-girlfriend leaves, they get into an argument and he's just like, I'm out of here. And she's like, what? You're just going to walk away? He's like, yeah, having an argument at a children's party is not a good look. And I was just like, all right, there's somebody who actually like thinks about things, you know?
Someone who is emotionally mature. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I liked his character. I mean, he was kind of in some ways too good to be true. And in other ways, kind of like, it was convenient when he had a backbone most of the time, but it was convenient when he didn't for the screenplay. So, you know, but those are nitpicks too. I mean, it's a rom-com. You got to follow some rules. So.
Right.
Anyway.
Although I will say he didn't seem to have initially much of a backbone. When he didn't have one, it seemed to involve his mom, which kind of makes sense. So
sure.
I'm like, if you want to like defend it.
No, you're right.
Well, yeah, when Gina Torres walks in on them and then it's just, you know, yelling at both of them and he just has, you know, cat got his tongue. He has nothing to say to his mom.
While he's going down on her, which was like,
yes,
because I was looking at that and I see her foot and I'm just like, oh, those are his knees under, like on the floor.
Yes.
And I was like, okay. And Megan, I'm sure you would appreciate how much this movie focuses on a woman's pleasure.
Yes, that's what I was gonna say. He goes down on her not once but twice in this movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, one of her friends says, "Oh, I'm sorry." Before they like meet, it's like, "Oh, you know, I mean, lots of use of. Women, in my experience, always talk more freely about their sexual encounters than men do when they're talking to, you know, their friends. Dudes kind of like." We just kind of dance around it. I don't know why. Maybe we're embarrassed, but pussy gets thrown around a lot in this movie. I'll just put it that way.
Yes.
So, and it's very funny and it's totally appropriate. And I didn't really realize this was like a hard R going in. So like when I can't remember when it is, the first time that they're like really getting down, I was like, oh, This is rated R.
Surprise!
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Oral sex. Here we go.
yep.
Yeah, and considering that Blue Valentine was going to have I always come back to this, was going to have an NC-17 rating specifically because of an oral sex scene, because of and focusing on a woman's pleasure. But thankfully, it did get changed to an R. But anyway, it's nice to see in a film that's on Netflix. It's great.
Nice to see how far we've come when it comes to going down.
Yeah. Things are looking up for going down. Oh.
Yay!
Hey-oh.
Hey-oh.
I haven't done one of those in a while.
What do you think, Evan?
I liked it, but I don't think I liked it as much as you two. And I think a lot of my issues with the film actually lie in the dialogue, which I think it was funny, Dave, that you texted us and you're like, I'm legit cracking up because I think there are some funny lines in the movie, but
especially in the beginning.
Yeah, in the beginning. This movie opened very strong with me. I was really enjoying it for maybe the first 15 or 20 minutes, and then I felt like it hit some dead spots, which it just kind of started to lose me. The dialogue, I think one of my issues is that I felt like it was trying too hard to create banter between the characters and also reminding us a million times over via dialogue that everything for Jenna is riding on this job. She says that multiple times in the movie. We haven't forgotten about this. You don't need to remind the audience 5 times about this issue. And so I was struggling to get through because of the dialogue, but I really did. I thought the costumes were great. I thought the sets and production design was fantastic. Such vibrant, interesting sets and color palettes. And to me, felt really appropriate for the world of fashion. And so I liked those aspects of the movie. I thought Gabrielle Union was great. I thought she had great chemistry. The leads, I thought had great chemistry together. When they were, it felt real to me that they were into each other from the moment, Keith Powers and Gabrielle Union's characters meet and they start making out. And she actually says to him, I think I could fall in love with you mid-makeout in the first time they meet. Mm-hmm. And, you were talking, Dave, about him being all in, but she was also kind of all in on it right away too. And it is refreshing and nice to see people that aren't playing games so much. Yeah. It's really more the circumstances that are super awkward and just kind of all right, well, we're still into each other, but this is weird. We got to work together. And Gina Torres is here and can't make any mistakes, either of us. Otherwise, we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, there are some tropes. But
yeah. So I thought it was all right. And also, like you both, I kind of wasn't responding very well to I was kind of really bored by the time we got to the pregnancy piece. I was really? Is this still going on? Oh, God. Oh, now we're going into, he's going to find out the pregnancy. He's going to have a bad reaction. We got to have Gina Torres come over. And it's just, I was kind of done with the story by that point. I wish it had kind of wrapped up sooner.
I hear you. Yeah, the pregnancy thing is a lot of plot.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Megan?
The one thing I will say, though, is that I think it's more than fair, thinking about in terms of the world of the film. I think it's more than fair that he needs to take a beat to think about what she said.
For sure.
Because, he's right. They haven't seen each other in months, and she's dropping a bomb on him. It is kind of interesting, though, because Dave, you talked about how he seems too good to be true. And every other time he's been all in. And this is kind of the one time he's not, just immediately, whatever you need, I'm there. I've got you, and but also at the same time, I'm like, that actually kind of feels realistic that he would need to take a step back and just process everything.
And they also, now granted, it is through the dialogue, but I don't know how you could do this otherwise. He does explain to her exactly why he is having the reaction he's having.
Yes.
And he says something to the effect of, you've had so much time to process it, and you expect me to have the reaction you want right now, immediately after you've told me. And yeah, I hear you, dude.
Yeah. At the same time, though, I think I this is probably more the dialogue. It comes off to me feeling kind of whiny and immature. His response, it felt like I understand what you're saying, Megan, about it being, yeah, of course, naturally someone would be like kind of knocked on their ass and not sure what to do emotionally in that situation. But I don't know, dialogue wise, I felt like it, for me, ended up coming off as more kind of like whiny and immature as opposed to someone kind of taking their space emotionally but inappropriately.
Yeah. Well, unless you were the coolest cat ever, I don't know how you respond to that.
Well, especially considering he's someone who has said explicitly, I do not want children. I will not have children. My movies will be my children.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
as someone who is child free by choice, I can completely understand that sentiment. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I might be filling in the gaps for the film, but yeah, he didn't come off as whiny to me, but I can understand your perspective, Evan. Makes sense.
Otherwise, what I felt to be a very emotionally mature character, as you both said.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is nice. Nice to see in a rom-com.
It is.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's always, it's always a thing that people talk about when they don't want to date someone that's younger. They don't want to date somebody that's emotionally immature. And unfortunately, most men do not, we're not sending our best when it comes to that. You know, men generally are not emotionally mature even when they're older. So
Yeah.
it's nice,
Yeah.
Yeah.
nice to have a younger character that actually is emotionally mature.
Right.
I mean, that might be generational too, though. I mean, I feel like a lot of people I know who are like a decade younger than I am are just kind of nicer than most of the people I grew up with.
Yikes.
Well, it's just because, why not? You remember that argument? It's like, oh, giving kids participation trophies. Everyone gets a trophy. Yeah, why not?
Why
Who
not?
fucking cares? It's Little League.
Exactly. I agree.
Your kid's not going to play in the MLB. Fuck off.
No, Dave, you raise a really good point. I think that's because I'm like, yikes, because you're talking about my generation too. But I'm like, yeah, no, that's why I don't really associate. Like, I don't feel an affinity for our generation because of that. Because I'm
Yeah,
like, who gives a shit about participation trophies? Give them
Yeah,
all
I
away.
kind
don't
of feel
care.
like we're the last generation, you and me, Megan, of like, we're right on the cusp of when things started to change, when it wasn't
Yes.
okay to just be shitty.
Right.
Like
right.
calling someone the F word and like in the Breakfast Club when Emilio
Yes.
Estevez drops that. Like
Yeah.
that was totally normal when I was a kid.
Completely.
But I feel like if you were born in 1984, no way.
Yeah,
So
People
Agreed.
still use that word when I was growing up. I was not
Well,
a fan of it.
yeah, I guess I mean
mean-
now as adults,
Right, right.
I know
Yes.
people who are roughly my age who still toss around words like that. And it's like, I really don't. That's a little
Yeah,
weird.
That's not cool.
But I the people I know who are 10 years younger than I think would never dream of saying that,
Right,
So
right.
Yes. Mhm.
anyway, that's all.
Yeah.
That's all. I'm
No,
saying.
I know what you're saying. Yeah. I will say in defense of I can't believe I'm gonna play devil's advocate against myself. In defense of the pregnancy storyline, I think it could be argued that it's trying to give Jenna everything, like where she gets the career, she gets the
Mhm.
romance, she gets the baby, because how often do we have Black women as leads in a rom-com, and then to see a woman, succeeding on all of these fronts, career-wise, creatively, romance, family, like kind of everything. She gets
Mhm.
everything she wants. And, it's some nice, wish fulfillment and
That's
whatnot.
true.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I could see that. I mean, also, I'm just reminded recently of watching that movie Days of Daisy, where, you had a character who was,
Oh, man.
under the gun trying to get pregnant, worried that biologically she was running up against the wall. And it is refreshing to see someone who in movies and TV would normally be painted as the like, oh, she's older, it's harder for her to get pregnant, and it's the whole thing. And it's just like we don't see as many stories about older parents who are like excited and it's not like this whole crazy thing that they have to go through to become a parent. It was like, oh, she's like, oh crap, I'm pregnant, this happened.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah, women get pregnant at 40 and 45 and into their 40s. I mean, yes, it happens less, But people getting pregnant in general is not the easiest thing. In like when people actually, if you actually look at fertility, anyway, that's a whole side conversation. But yes,
right.
my point is, my long-winded point, I agree with you, Evan, that yes, it is refreshing to see because so often, like once you hit 40 as a woman, it's like, oh, you're barren. Nothing's happening. It's like,
I mean, even
no,
the fact
that's not real.
Yeah. Well, then even the fact that they call pregnancies over the age of like 35 geriatric
Geriatric.
pregnancy.
Yes, they do.
It's like, what?
Yes,
Come
they do.
on.
It's weird.
Trust me,
I mean-
as the only woman here, trust me, you guys have no idea how horrible it is to go to the doctor when you start getting quote unquote older.
Yeah.
I mean, you might in other ways, like, for yourselves, but trust me, yeah, as a woman, like, oh my God, some of the questions that are asked are just appalling anyway. I digress.
I'm not gonna try to outdo you because I and I'm not, but I will say just in as far as aging and doctoring, it is getting more uncomfortable as time goes on. Like 10 years ago, it was like, big fucking deal. I went to the doctor. Now it's like, oh God,
Right.
what are they going to stick in me this time? It's like,
Yeah, why is it such a fucking production? Jesus.
I know. It's like every time I go to the doctor, I get blood drawn. Every time. Like I went there for, you remember I had conjunctivitis over the winter. I got my blood drawn for that. It's like, what is going on here? Yeah. Like, well, maybe you've got some kind of fucking virus. Or my doctor didn't say some kind of fucking virus, but
I was like, you have a badass doctor.
yeah. So anyway.
The other thing I will say about back to this film is that I like, granted they're not the leads, but I like that we have some supporting characters who are queer, and there's a trans actress who is one of the influencers in the film, and I like that too. So I like that we're getting bits of representation.
The what was really strange though in the movie is when the seafood allergy came out of nowhere.
Oh
Yeah.
That was a little strange.
That was very strange.
That was
Bro, your
surprising.
lips all swollen. Do you have seafood? then there's another character just comes in with her EpiPen and jabs him in the leg.
Yes.
Here, take mine.
By the way, that's Aisha Hines, and she's in Underground, a very underrated show that I adore, and she's great. Great actress.
Yeah.
Nice.
But
Oh,
yeah,
man.
that was weird.
Yeah.
And also, who puts fish sauce in the salad dressing? That's a side.
Yeah. I was like, all right,
It's a
well
side
maybe they had stir fry. I don't know. Nope.
No, right?
It was like taco night
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah,
or
it was
enchilada
taco
night.
night. Yeah.
Uh,
I don't know the finer points of using fish sauce, but
you don't, in my experience, generally put it in salad dressing.
No.
I mean, unless she was making a Caesar, but then it's more likely that you would maybe use
Right.
sardines. So,
Right.
which,
Right. Or anchovies. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
I'm sorry, I meant anchovies. Sorry.
Yeah. I knew what you meant.
I
Yeah.
thought maybe there was a variation that uses sardines.
No, I was thinking of the oil that comes from like when you get like canned anchovies or whatever that you also incorporate.
Mhm.
So, anyway.
Gotcha.
Well, that was certainly an amusing detour in this conversation. Is there anything else we wanted to say about The Perfect Find?
No. I mean, it's not the perfect find, but it's good enough.
Yeah.
This makes me want
A-okay,
to see
fine.
Gabrielle Union in more things.
Yeah.
And I might have to watch her show Being Mary Jane, which has been on my list for a very long time.
I was looking at her filmography before I watched this, and I was like, wow, she was like the same character in like 3 teen movies in a row.
She was a teenager. She probably still could play a teenager. She was a teenager in so many movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she's 50 and she's playing a 40-year-old character here. So
Believably, too, I might add.
absolutely believably, 100%.
So, yeah, when I
By
looked
the way-
up and I was
oh,
like, she's
yes.
50? What? So,
Yeah. I just want to say the other thing, this is a side thing, but I think it's an important one, especially in this political climate. I love how supportive she and her husband are of their trans daughter. It's lovely.
Yeah, it's awesome. Then they moved out of Florida because they're fuck Florida.
Yes,
her
they did.
daughter's not gonna be safe here.
Yes, they did. And they have been very, like, as soon as their daughter came out as trans to them, they reached out to trans artists who worked on Pose, I believe, and they read everything they could, and they talked to people. Like, they wanted to be the best parents they could possibly be for their daughter. And I think that's just lovely. I mean, of course, they have the resources because they're, an athlete and an actress, respectively, but still lovely and supportive. It's so wonderful to see.
Oh, right. That's right. She's her husband. Right. I forgot who he was. We were talking about this, but now I remember.
Yeah. Dwayne Wade.
Yeah. It's kind of a big deal. Yeah.
We just refer to him as Mr. Gabrielle Union.
There you
That's
go.
all. He will henceforth be known as Mr. Gabrielle Union.
No, I thought it was Dwayne Wade, but then I was like, wait, am I mixing it up with what's his face on A Different World?
Dwayne. You mean Dwayne Wayne?
Yes. So whenever I hear Dwayne Wade, I'm like, wait, is that actually his name? Or am I thinking of Kadeem Hardison on A Different World?
I'm going to replay that over in my mind several times because that is amazing.
I'm so glad you loved that.
Also, like, I just watched A Different World like 2 years ago. I watched the entire thing, like from the first episode to the last episode.
That's an amazing show. I'm jealous. I'm going to have to do that, but
that is the perfect show for late 80s, early 90s fashion also, by the way.
So good. Such a good show.
It's amazing.
Anyway,
we've digressed.
I know. We have. Again. Sorry, Evan.
It's all right. We're having fun. All right, so let's bring it back in here. So Stan Lee documentary is on Disney Plus. Would we say see it or don't see it?
I can't recommend it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fine introduction, and if you really love Stan Lee, you might want to hear what he has to say. But yeah, like Dave said before, there's nothing that if you already know, you're not probably going to learn anything new, and there's a lot of weird choices of omissions. So if you go in knowing that you should do your own reading on him.
Yeah. I come down, I think, on the side of skip it because it's just so many weird choices and it's not well told. You'd be better off going elsewhere learning about Stan Lee.
Yeah, skip it. Why am I even hedging my bets? Yeah, just skip it.
Yeah. But it sounds like we would recommend The Perfect Find, which is available on Netflix.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's enough here that's enjoyable and definitely worth watching, even though I didn't love it as much as you two.
Yeah.
Alrighty then. Well, that wraps up another episode of Spoiler Piece Theater. We want to say a huge thank you to our editor, Otto Klammer. Otto, thank you for making us sound great week after week.
Thanks,
you, Otto.
You can find the show anywhere you get podcasts, but you can also find us at our website, which is spoilerpiece.com. We are all over social media. We're Spoiler Piece Theater on Facebook. We're at Spoiler Piece on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd. You can send us an email if you want to get in touch with us. You can email us, spoilerpiece@gmail.com, and tell us we're totally wrong about Stan Lee and the Stan Lee documentary, or maybe tell us how much you liked The Perfect Find once it arrives on Netflix today.
Today.
Yes.
When this episode airs. Or if you want to call and leave us a voicemail, you can call.
At 862-21-PEACE.
Leave us a message. Just say hi. I don't know. Call us and we'll take it from there.
Yeah.
If you like the show, please rate and review us. You can go to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece, and that will take you to your platform of choice. That really helps more people find the show and helps give us cred out there in the podcast world. So, and it doesn't cost anything to show your support of the show. So please rate and review us. We really appreciate it. And if you really, really like the show, please consider joining our Patreon. As I mentioned at the top of this week's episode, we talked about the 1993 film Jurassic Park in honor of its recent 30th anniversary, and it was a lot of fun. So consider becoming a patron. As I mentioned, $5 a month, you get access to weekly bonus episodes where we talk about older films. You can vote in polls. We're going to have a poll coming up very soon, so look out for that if you're a patron. And yeah, you can go to patreon.com/spoilerpiece to find us there. And so, my name is Evan Crean. I am co-chair of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s movie guide to better living. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd as Real Recon, and that's real as in film reel.
My name is Megan Kearns. I write film reviews for Edge Media Network. I, too, am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association and am a member of Gallica. You can follow me on Twitter at OpinionSWorld or on Instagram and Letterboxd at TheOpinionS.
My name is Dave Riedel. I write for the Chicago Reader. I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. And if you'd like to follow me on the internet, etc., I'm Dave Sees Movies on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd.
We'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.